Mambo Vipi, what's happening? My name is Anyiko Owoko and I am a lover of arts, culture and everything African. And here we grant you front row access to your favorite celebrities, creators, the biggest personalities and industry experts. Come with me, you're now a VIP. This is what to expect on this week's episode.
And we were putting together an event, and so we had to think through what does an event look like. And at that point, I was collaborating. And I think that's the truth of curation. It's really very much collaboration. But at that time, I was working with my managing editor and the rest of the team, and we put together a performance of the work, and there was a panel conversation. And I was like, I really like this work. I really like being behind the scenes and creating an experience. And from there, I just got opportunity after opportunity. And then the festival happened, and that was at a massive scale. And we were on the road for 28 days. It was incredible. And I was like, wow, I really like this work. It's terrible and terrifying, but I really, really like creating an experience for people. And it kind of snowballed into the work that I do now.
We started based on trying to create a space for our own self, for our music to be heard, which eventually grew. Then we sat down and thought, so this thing we are building that is growing, what will be the philosophy of, say, folk fusion? What do we do? And then we decided it's going to be a property for African music for Africans. So anyone who's writing music in an African language, telling an African story, this is a space for them. So speaking of curation, to summarize, I think for our case, we wanted to curate a property where it doesn't matter how big in the traditional sense, like how many streams you have. As long as you're an amazing performer and you're writing African music, we are going to give you the stage.
And I have to say, I feel like a bit of an imposter calling myself a curator, because I actually came to it, I think one comes to these things sometimes accidentally. I started the Nairobi Film Festival with my co-founder Mbithi Masia around the fact that he had made a film, Kati Kati, and it was opening in a wonderful festival, TIFF, in Canada, and he actually won a great prize there. And then his film traveled to all these festivals around the world, and at each place, he received a lot of praise and acclamation for it, but he was a little bit heartbroken about the fact that when it came to Kenya, it wasn't going to be able to show in the context of a festival.
Hello, what's up, and welcome back to VIP Access. As always, it's wonderful to have your company. We're going to be continuing a conversation we started on the podcast over the last 2 episodes, delving deep into the world of event production, setting up festivals, managing the funds when it comes to event experiences, and even booking artists. Last 2 episodes talked about how to set up a proper event, especially when it comes to festivals and theater performances, and how to make sure that the artist you're booking is always happy and delivers what exactly the fans are expecting. This week on the podcast, we're discussing curating festivals, lineups, and experiences that speak volumes. Curating a festival is more than setting a stage, theme, or lineup. It's certainly about crafting an experience that lingers long after the lights go down. Behind the scenes lies meticulous work, weaving together genres, narratives, cultures, and stories that intersect with current affairs, global issues, and entertainment. Festivals also serve as a level playing field for both emerging and established talent, while offering unique opportunities to showcase new projects and connect with audiences. So before I get into introducing the speakers on the podcast this week, I would like to invite you to Goethe Institute this Friday, 17th April at the auditorium. We're going to be having our next Industry Talks conversation, which is a spotlight on the TV and film industry. I'm really anticipating this conversation because I have an expert group of speakers and panelists who include Mumbi Maina, who's an accomplished actor who has also had experience acting in Hollywood. Arnold Mwangila is an accomplished writer who's behind a lot of the TV shows that you probably have watched and loved. We'll also have Susan Mbogo, who's the executive director at DocuBox and also a producer in her own right. Our topic of conversation this Friday is going to be making Kenyan stories bankable and the balance between craft and commerce. So make sure you come through and experience the live recording of VIP Access and what happens at industry talks. It's actually always fun. After the conversation, we always have time to interact, talk, network, exchange contact. It's a great space to be in. So I'm looking forward to see you all at the Kote Institute this Friday, 17th April, for another wonderful conversation. Back to our podcast conversation this week. Sheba Hirst is a festival director and co-founder of the NBO Film Festival. She champions outstanding films from Kenya and the African continent to audiences in NBO Nairobi. Sheba is most passionate about convening audiences around powerful creative material, which she has done as a leading producer in the lively Nairobi theatre scene, as an entertainment manager and label executive for Rainmaker Limited and Rain Records, and as a creator of television and digital content over the last decade. She is most committed to building new and meaningful creative collaborations across disciplines and to sheltering and nurturing creators at the earliest stages of their work. Ayrosh, on the other hand, is a Kenyan folk fusion singer and songwriter celebrated for his futuristic take on Mogidhi sounds alongside his band, The Movement. He's carved out a fresh sound thanks to his singing in Gikuyu, English, and Kiswahili, and stories that weave themes of culture, love, and everyday struggles. He's also the visionary behind Folk Fusion, which is a festival that has grown from a backyard gathering in 2018 to a 2,000-plus capacity celebration of Kenyan heritage, showcasing acts from Savara and Bensoul to vernacular and emerging voices in the industry. Wanjeri Gakuru is a freelance journalist, essayist, curator, and filmmaker. She has been the curator of the Nairobi Litfest, co-presented by Book Bank and Hay Festival from 2023 to 2026. In 2025, she curated the Rewind Remix Reclaim Festival that commemorated the 40th anniversary of the UN World Conference on Women, first held in July 1985. Our podcast this week is going to pull back the curtain on the artistry and strategy of festival curation. So this is really for you too, if you've been thinking about becoming a festival curator. We'll be talking to really experienced curators, and today's episode will give you an insight as to what goes behind the work for you as a curator, and how does your work intersect with the work of other creatives and professionals behind the scenes when setting up festivals. This is going to be a very interesting conversation because we're not just talking about music festivals, but what does it take to curate and to program a film festival or a literature festival? If you've ever wondered what it really takes to build a festival that resonates, then you're in the right place and you're going to enjoy today's episode. Let's dive straight into it. How did you get to this point that you became a curator? And what's the role of a curator? It's a broad question, but if you could just maybe summarize as a starting point.
I guess I get the hard gig of kicking it off. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here this evening. And so to answer the question of what is a curator, how did I find myself here making the Nairobi Film Festival? And I have to say, I feel like a bit of an imposter calling myself a curator, because I actually came to it, I think one comes to these things sometimes accidentally. I started the Nairobi Film Festival with my co-founder Mbithi Masia around the fact that he had made a film, Kati Kati, and it was opening in a wonderful festival, TIFF, in Canada, and he actually won a great prize there. And then his film traveled to all these festivals around the world, and at each place, you know, he received a lot of praise and acclamation for it, but he was a little bit heartbroken about the fact that when it came to Kenya, it wasn't going to be able to show in the context of a festival. Now, he and I had been collaborators because he was a graphic designer before he became a filmmaker, and I, at that time, was curating music events. I had done the Sawa Sawa Festival. I was running concert series. My partner is a musician. I knew how to make a festival. I know, I mean, that's like, and a film festival sounded easy in some ways because they were significantly just files, right? Like film files. Not so many bands and musicians and like grumpy schedules to deal with and tempers and egos. And so just over the course of one evening, I said to him, but like, we can just make one. We'll make a festival around your film so that you can launch your film at a festival. And that's sort of the unofficial story of like how we started. We just planned it out and picked a date. And we thought the interesting thing to do would be to surround that film, which was like at the time the newest big feature film that Kenya had made, with a series of films that had been made in Kenya as a way of sort of reminding ourselves that we are a filmmaking country. We are a film sector. We don't think of ourselves as that because we don't produce with a lot of frequency. But Kenya has been making films in a long tradition. And if we could bring those films together and look at them together. And so we asked a bunch of filmmakers, Kenyan filmmakers, whether they would give us their films for the festival. And that was the first edition. It was like a survey of the films that Kenya had made from the 60s until now. And it was a really enjoyable experience. And thus began the journey of making the Nairobi Film Festival. What is curating? I don't really know that there's a simple answer other than...
It's a whole lot of things.
It's a whole... Well, I suppose, and it's convening a set of ideas around another set of ideas for the enjoyment of an audience, maybe. And choosing a lens with which to see the world and inviting people to look through that lens with you. And hoping that that lens that you're making is intentional and sort of shows us some new way of looking at the world. That's the way I'd like to think about it.
For me, it was in 2017. Actually, no, it wasn't 2017. It was 2015, if I'm not wrong. We had, as Jalada, published a short story by Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and we were very excited by this wonderful gift of the late, great Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And we were very excited by the fact that he had offered us an original story, which we had then translated into other languages. And we wanted to invite, because he had been in the country, and he very graciously gave us time, and Power offered us a space. And at that point, I was in charge of like events. I was very much doing whatever was available, whatever was needed rather at the collective. And we were putting together an event. And so we had to like think through what does an event look like. And at that point, I was collaborating. And I think that's the truth of curation. It's really very much collaboration. But at that time, I was working with my managing editor and the rest of the team, and we put together a performance of the work, and there was a panel conversation. And I was like, I really like this work. I really like being behind the scenes and creating an experience. And from there, I just got opportunity after opportunity. And then the festival happened, and that was at a massive scale. And we were on the road for 28 days. It was incredible. And I was like, wow, I really like this work. It's terrible and terrifying, but I really, really like creating an experience for people. And it kind of like snowballed into the work that I do now. And I completely agree with you about curation being about perspective and a lens. And I think the wonderful thing is that we get to do our work frequently, whatever frequency that we have it. We tend to have different themes, different perspectives. And it's so wonderful thinking through how do we achieve this idea? How do we approach this idea from different perspectives? So for me, that's like the joyous part of curating. And yeah, that's what I like about the work.
Around the same time, around 2017. And if you asked me then that folk fusion would become what it became, I wouldn't have imagined it, because the way we started it, it was more of looking for space to perform. So I'm a musician. And that time, we had made music, we were performing in small setups, places like this. We performed here before, Allianz, there was a lot of poetry shows around that time, slam, things like that. However, we were not being booked. So basically, we were not being booked. And our fans would ask us, how can we support you? And then, in Kenya, you can only sell as many CDs as you can. We can only sell as many streams. So then the thought came, if I have 100 fans, why can't I just put up a show for 100 fans? So that's what happened around 2017. And we did I remember the first concert had like maybe 100 people, and then like 50 were my crew and the band. And so by doing that, we quickly noticed that there was space for that kind of music, because people started coming. People started asking, when's the next one? And I was not the only one. So if you look at the people who do the kind of music I do, which is a fusion of, I would say, I don't like saying traditional, because I'm not traditional really. It's mostly the language. There were many of us. If I remember, we started based on trying to create a space for our own self, for our music to be heard, which eventually grew. Then we sat down and thought, so this thing we are building that is growing, what will be the philosophy of, say, folk fusion? What we'll do? And then we decided it's going to be a property for African music for Africans. So anyone who's writing music in an African language, telling an African story, this is a space for them. So speaking of curation, to summarize, I think for our case, we wanted to curate a property where it doesn't matter how big in the traditional sense, like how many streams you have. As long as you're an amazing performer and you're writing African music, we are going to give you the stage. And over the period of time that we've managed to put up the concert, I think we've managed to curate a concert that is really comes from the heart.
So looking at you guys, I'm just seeing the diversity of our industry, you know, from music to literature to films. And we were having a side discussion before this started, like there's an ethos towards whatever event or whatever festival. You want it to be as diverse as possible. You want your audience to come back. You want them to maybe discover something they were not expecting. So I just wanted to ask you guys how you go about that.
So the festival happens every year and falls across 4 days and then across 3 venues. Now, the good thing about that is that these things are set. You know the capacity, you know the dates, you know the audiences. But then you have a team that's very excited about adding into the program. So the first edition was in 2021. This is Nairobi Litfest. It was online and it was marking the 90th anniversary of the Macmillan Library. So every edition since has had a thematic focus. And every year we realize we can bring in more people. So as much as I'm like, I know the floor space and who we can bring in, the team always is like, but you see that corner there, we can do something there, we can do something there. So because of that, and luckily we start planning months in advance, you start to think about, okay, what experience can we give people here, knowing that this program we're running from this time to this time, how does it not clash with the people outside? So you start to prepare. I have this crazy Excel sheet that goes from A to Z that has from Thursday as early as 10 a.m. all the way down to 10 p.m. So our program typically runs that long. So we know that our Thursdays are opening day, and that's where we do a showcase, like a small highlight of everything in the program. And then we have our Friday program, which is master classes in the children's program. And then we have a Saturday and Sunday, which is our public facing program. Now, because we start months in advance and we are collaborating with the Hay Festival, it allows us to really think broadly about who we can bring, what experience we can give people. But also you start thinking about if you're bringing somebody from abroad, you want to make sure they maximize their time here. They've got an audience here that loves them or doesn't know them but could fall in love with them. How do we create moments for them to interact with them in a way that is exciting, in a way that makes them feel like they leave feeling very enriched? So then we look at all the properties that we have. We have master classes, we have our one-on-one conversations, which now we call book talk. If somebody has a book, it's a one-on-one conversation about that particular text. But because we're a festival of ideas, we also want to know what are the other things that they're about. Is it from their political perspective? Is it stuff they're written about? Is it stuff that just they engage in? And then also, what happens when you mix different perspectives? So like even us, amongst us, we are so diverse, but all of us offer something exciting. So you find, okay, what is a core idea that this person maybe would be interested to speak about? And then who do we bring? And for me, my first audience is Kenyan. Always. I'm always thinking about how do we engage amongst ourselves? How do we see ourselves on stage? So we'll always have our big international person. Now they're in that position. And then we have the Kenyan perspective that is on a peer-to-peer engagement. That's super important for me, that everybody has got something to say, but you put them in a space where they feel like they are speaking amongst peers. And so that's what happens in my mind when I'm thinking about the program. Now, if I can add something really small, so that's the typical work because I've been doing that for the last 3 years. But then I had this wonderful opportunity to create an 11-day program that could be anything. Well, the core thing was the conference, but we were pulling from it, but we were like, okay, let's look at the contemporary issues that we could speak to now regarding feminism or womanhood today. And then you're like, okay, so we have 11 days. Oh my God. And we've got 2 venues. And then we have, and I'm happy Christina is here, a very, very wonderful, open-minded team that is like anything is possible within the budget, of course. And so you start to think about what can we do? And you're like, okay, what are the things that people actually want. We want a self-defense program so we can learn to take care of ourselves. We want to do yoga. We want to have artists respond to the work and create an exhibition around that. And then you start to pull on all the threads from this core idea. And sometimes it's about parameters in which you're working, but sometimes you just have like fixed things and you're thinking, you're problem solving within like very particular spaces. And that's what sometimes is very exciting about the work.
That was the Rewind Remix Reclaim Festival. She was talking about the last part.
Well, what do we think about when we're making the festival? I mean, when I was just a college student, just after I left, I had the chance to go to visit West Africa, and I went to FESPACO Film Festival. Have any of you ever been there? Yeah, you went this year, right? Yeah, for the first time. When I went, it blew my mind. There was nothing like it that I had ever seen in East Africa, because you just have to imagine an African city that gives itself over to cinema for a whole 10 days. And the streets are just filled with all these filmmakers that you've read about in the books and meeting in cafes, and then the cinemas. And at that time, it was rather bigger. The festival opens, first of all, in the stadium by the president. It's a film festival, the stadium, and the president opens it and there's a horse, and it was such an elevated, the streets are, the banners are about films. You're bumping into like your cinema heroes. It's like a kind of like Wakanda of film heroes of the African context. You are just surrounded by African cinema excellence, all convened in one place. And there was something so intense about that experience. Like as an East African, I don't know whether we do that level of intensity very often, except maybe what I remember from my childhood going to the Nairobi show, which was another that was a proper big festival also, right? And so that idea very much shaped my idea of what a festival could be. Burkinabe people were lining up around the block to see the opening of their home film, which was sometimes a really bad film, but they were like so enthusiastically supportive of the efforts of their own creators. And then, of course, of all the other films as well. And I just really treasured this idea and this memory. And I was overwhelmed by the feeling that, I'd been a college student, gone to America, was coming back, traveling around West Africa, see this thing. And I'm like, there's nothing like this at home. And then my last stop on this tour that I was doing was to Zanzibar. And there was the Zanzibar Film Festival that was being curated by the writer Yvonne Awar. And this was like East Africa's version of this thing. Again, this beautiful, overly romantic island. Zanzibar is a very magical little place. And then it was just chock-full with filmmakers, writers, artists, like all sorts of interesting people. And everything was just buzzing with an energy that I hadn't experienced before. And so that kind of gave me the tone or the temperature of what I felt like I wanted to be part of creating whenever I convened a creative event. When Bithi and I, years later, were starting to talk about what we wanted the festival to feel like, we very much put ourselves at the center of it because it wasn't going to be big or grand. We had neither money or particularly vast resources. And so we tried to make something that we wanted to go to. And what we really wanted to go to as we looked at what the successive years would look like is we wanted to go to something where we could be in the forefront of the conversation about African film. African films from the rest of the continent do not come to Nairobi as a matter of fact. And so you read about them and hear about them, and maybe you see them if you go to a festival in Europe somewhere, which is completely backwards for our own things. We wanted things that took Kenyan stories and showed them to us in a very elevated way. So we wanted people to have that feeling that you get from being in the cinema and seeing your own people, in that super scale that I like to call the cathedral effect, where you have the moment of awe of just seeing your stories projected really big. And for just regular folks to see that. So we knew we wanted it to be in the same cinemas where all the Marvel movies were showing, and we wanted our things in conversation with those things, very much like you're saying, and bringing a dialogue between the things that we are making and the things that the rest of the world is making. So it was important to us to be in the mainstream spaces. we wanted to choose films also that commercial distribution channels were not automatically bringing to Nairobi, but that were important, we felt, for the Nairobi story or the Kenyan story or the African story. So films that were coming, our own films that we were making here, the films that were being made in the rest of the African continent and how they related to what the perspectives that we had of ourselves and of each other. And then also films from the larger Black diaspora, so with, Black Afro-Caribbean films and Afro-South American films. Like, who even knew there were, who had an idea of what was being made there? I'm not going to be like the people who discovered the Black Scotsmen just last week on Twitter. We knew there were Black people in South America. We just hadn't seen their films. And so these things were the things that were important to us. And then sort of as the guiding principles, we were just we didn't want to start with thematic programming. We just didn't want to do that. We wanted to put in place a different set of values that guided what we chose in our programming. So we wanted to program films that were rigorously made, which means that, you really worked hard on making the film. Things that were aesthetically beautiful, that give you, because it's a visual medium, and beautiful doesn't just mean pretty, but like something that shows you a new way of looking at the world. And then things that had something to say to the world. And these are really difficult to pin down, but you know it when you see it, is sort of how we started the process. Of course, as you grow, you start to see the need to now have categories of things with lots of different criteria. And as you democratize the decision making in your structure, that begins to change. But that sort of stays the ethos in the back of your mind somewhere, and it helps you really understand what the tone is. We also wanted to make sure that we were very located in the community. And this came later, you can call yourself the Nairobi Film Festival, but if everything is in Westlands, it's just a version of the Nairobi Film Festival, And so we started to think about having film screenings in Kaloleni. Nairobi, as you know, is a city that had what you can think of as an architecture apartheid. The people who built the city initially decided which side needed cinemas and which side didn't need cinemas. And Eastlands apparently didn't need cinemas according to the original architects of Nairobi. And we thought, well, this is a crying shame, and we should be part of bringing the cinema experience to young people growing up in Eastlands as much as anybody else anywhere in the city, and beginning to address these things at an architectural level, a structural level that says this is an important thing and it should be anchored. Yeah. So we started showing films at Kaloleni Social Hall, and also starting to think about what that means about bringing young people in that community. Kaloleni is a community that gets filmed a lot in the media. It's always every crew's favorite place to film a low-income neighborhood because it's accessible, it's safe, and it has an aesthetic vibe. Yeah. But there's all these young people who are there, and are they really equipped to participate in this industry that's passing through? Or are we being, as an industry, a lot like what happens with expatriate filmmakers who come, it lands like a rocket and then it goes, And so just making sure that young people in that community were also equipped to be able to participate in this phenomenon that keeps on happening in their neighborhood. And so we run also a series of entry-level workshops during the festival to just bring people on board. And that's sort of each year something new emerges, and you respond to it, I think, as honestly and as generously and as focusedly as you can. And always convening communities and trying to pay attention to what it is that community needs. I like to think of a festival as a moment to convene ourselves. It's like when religious people get together for a revival, to recharge their religious energy, in a tent, and get very excited about their thing. And that's what a festival is. But it's also an opportunity for us to really listen to each other about the challenges that we're facing. And for us who are people working in that sector, to see opportunities to unlock those problems or to bring resources to address those issues. Yeah.
So I think about it from now, our lens, in, I'd say maybe 4 ways. I would say number one is what our dream was, what we imagined, what we really wanted, The idea we have in mind just before you execute. We imagined a festival as a place where you could just get lost. The minute you enter, you forget about your rent, madeni, you just forget, and you're just immersed in the moment and in the environment, because at some point we would have a film stage. We would have a chill spot, because I saw that sometime in another festival. And I was like, this is really nice to have, because after you've been overly stimulated by watching your favorite acts, you might need somewhere to just digest, right? For things like that. The second thing I think we think about as we are curating is we need, because I remember we were doing it as a kiosk to Kianza, because we were just bootstrapping most of the time, right? So we realized this property that we are building, it's not just about what's happening on stage, it's also about the people who are coming in. We curated our show sort of to speak to music lovers. Like, we knew the people who come to Folk Fusion are music lovers, and that's why we were not shy of, say, booking newer acts, very niche acts who are known in very small, different circles, because we knew the audience that we've curated, they will appreciate seeing somebody new, and they will sort of go listen to them and reshare and all that. Then the third thing we noticed is that there's an aspect of co-creation between us who are doing the production or setting up the concerts and our audience or our fans. So we noticed there's a level of co-creation there. For example, they want to dress a certain way, so maybe give them the opportunity to do that. When they come to the concert, they want to express themselves artistically, so you give them a space where they can do that, maybe like a wall where they can, like a leave a memento. They could, so there's an aspect of co-creation, and that went to our vision of, I would call, community building. We wanted to build a community around music lovers as we were going. The other thing would be, now, I knew so many dope artists. Sometimes you feel like you'd like to listen to all of them in one night, but maybe you may not. Because I think I was coming from a time where we had Akina Sarabi, we had Happy Band, tulikuwa na Kina Q back in the day. I don't know if you remember. In terms of now programming, we decided to just go for, you have an album, it's dope, you play live, and that's basically it. So I think, say, our dream, which was a festival that you can get lost in, community building, and of course, dope music.
Amazing. I would love for us to speak about community building, but before we get to that, maybe the time it actually takes. It's not a one-man job. Maybe certain things are, maybe certain decisions are, but not entirely, especially for festivals of a certain magnitude that take days. And even one festival that takes one day, you prepare for so long. You don't wake up and say, we're having a festival next week. So if you guys could take us through the time it takes, like practically, if I'm sitting in the audience and I would like to be a curator of a festival or an event that should be consistent, I don't know, twice a year, how long does it actually take to do these things, to plan these things? And I know there's a lot of moving parts, including the funding. You need the money to make it work. And then sometimes you also need the schedules of the people. We're having a festival and we'd like to have this writer, this filmmaker, they're not available. So how do you guys navigate this and build on this, and what amount of time does it take?
I think I'm slightly different from the two, because they are in the driving seat primarily with their festivals. I am a consultant oftentimes, so I'm always told, like, okay, we'd like to work with you to do this thing. So in that universe, it's quite wonderful, because often those guys have working teams. And again, kudos to Kote Institute and their team, just very hands-on, all through to the sound guys. Like, everybody makes this work possible. And when you have a team that's like amazing, it makes the work much easier. But I can speak maybe in a smaller capacity in the work that I do with my film club. So I run a film club called Mengi Mengi Film Club, where I pair a short Kenyan film with a Pan-African feature film of a similar focus. We try and do it monthly. We used to have it at the Eastlands Library, and it's coming back. It's coming back, guys. It's going to be at Munyu from November. But the thing about that is, you have to be the disciplined one. You have to be the one to set a structure that makes sense. Because then if you are one person running everything, you have to think through advertising. When do I make the posters? When do I send them out? If I'm involving artists, when do I start engaging them? When do I confirm them? So that is an internal disciplinary process. And often I've found the best time is start now. For example, I'm already in the process because I need to alert people that the change of venue and the date and all of those things. But with my other work, it's a little bit better because the dates are kind of set. So with last year's edition, I started working in September. I'm hoping they'll call me back. But often I start as early as that, so that then those big guys that you're bringing in, who you know will be the pull for the festival. Because what you're thinking about when you're thinking about the audience that comes to a place like that, as much as the program is free, you want people to feel like, I can commit this time to come all this way to this place, right? You don't have to have, but it does help to have these big names. And often these guys have their schedules until 2027. So you have to be like, make a strong argument so you make it early. But then once you have this anchor people, then you build things around them. So the earlier, the better. So with Litfest, we started the year before, but with the program in 2017 in the 5 countries, we started 2 years before because we had to do major fundraising. We had to figure out design the journey. Where do we start? At what point do we stop? What are the roads? Like in Tanzania, there's, I think it's like 60 kilometers per hour. So like that would affect when we would reach places. So what would we do? So that took a really long time. So the longest I've taken is 2 years. The shortest I've taken is a couple of months.
You have a great idea, you see a gap, you feel it, right? I think over time, the more you do, you sort of create a tempo. And for example, if you have a fixed calendar, then you can work backwards from it. I will say this, if it's what I would call a commercial and you have budget, you could do 8 weeks if you wanted to, I think. But if you were to trade that, I would say a sweet spot would be anywhere past 3 months, especially if you want to do a good job, especially in regards to production, programming, and of course, advertising, right? Then I would say around 3 months to the date of your event. But again, as she said, if you're in the driving seat, it takes a lot of, number one, discipline. Because if you're the vision owner, then you need to, motivate your team and drive it. If you're able to create a team that also understands the visions quite clearly and also understands the opportunities and the limits. Because, for example, I'll speak for myself. Maybe I have lofty dreams. Yeah, like a 15 by 15 stage. I want 10 screens. I want people who are being ticketed to feel FOMO when they're outside. I want a screen there, right? And then now also you need a team of people who will tell you the truth and be like, yo, this is what we are working with. So it's a 4x4. Yeah. Things like that. So you need a team that is, number one, really also understands the vision, are willing to, step up, and tell you the truth. Because it has happened to me. For example, I was talking about not having a festival. So there's one time we wanted to do a festival, which is like a 2-day festival. And we did it in Sagana, Nakili Turamba, it was a lesson, right? So it was a beautiful, beautiful show, but we learned a lot from the back end. So having a team that can keep you grounded as the vision bearer is quite important, yeah.
Also, the good thing about having a team is that you delegate things. Because sometimes if you're carrying everything ahead, so you need someone who's in charge of maybe a particular stage or a particular task, and then that makes it even much easier and more efficient.
As far as how long it takes to make a festival, it's like asking how long a string is in some way. I don't know yet. Because what is a made festival, right? I mean, we're still making it. We're still making a version of it that is like, is it made? Like Bado, it's like this part needs to be. So I'm learning every year. I thought it was a year. I think it's at least 2, and in the case of ours, in terms of getting all the pieces in place so that it can really flow the way it wants to. On a very practical note, I feel like you need to give yourself a very strong go, no-go date, which is the date when you decide. It doesn't have to be the date when you decide to do it or not do it. It's the date you decide to do it for the money you have and not for money that you think is going to come. So if you have zero money, you're like, do the zero money version. I mean, still do it, but do the version that is for the money that you have and not going beyond that. Because it's sort of like, if you're fundraising for the next edition. This one is going to be the one with a 4x4 stage, Haina 15 by 15, and it has one guy with one mic and one guitar, like very pared down, but with the same ambition in spirit. And the same thing, for film or for literature, whatever it is, just giving yourself an opportunity to then make the best, because what it needs is your creative attention. And I sort of like to think of that period as being 6 months for me, to be like, whatever the money is, by that 6 month point, then we're making that thing, that's the size of it. It gives me peace, and it also gives me pressure as well to resolve by a certain date. And it also gives other people in my team clarity about what it is that we hopefully are doing. That's the ambition. It doesn't always play out like that. But as far as teams go, our main team is now maybe 35 people. And then with volunteers, it's like another 15 or 20 on top of that. It's nice. I don't know whether that's big or small. It's just the number. It feels like it's half the people we need because everybody's doing 2 or 3 things. And I'm not yet at that point where I can loftily watch and just be like, oh, that's going, The ambition, I met this woman who runs this huge festival, and I asked her, what advice do you have for me as a young upcoming producer? And she was like, on the day that it starts, don't do anything else. You need to walk around with a little notebook, writing down all the things that you need to do next time. And so you need to have a structure where there's enough people getting on with it so that you have a chance to sit back and actually look at what you've made. And so that's the beginning of what the next edition is going to look at. And so I do a version of that. So right in the middle of this one, I'm already making the next one all the time.
On the teams, like when you're asking whether the number is big or small, I feel like in the planning stage, you feel like it's a lot. And then on the day of execution, we're like, there should have been more. We should have been more.
I wanted to ask something, because all your festivals are very particular. Like there's a vision, there's a reason, there's sometimes a theme or goals that you want to squash. Like, what has made you happy with the work that you have done so far? Like, what have you experienced from your audience that made you take notes to continue what you're doing, how you're doing, or even maybe to add on to what you are not already doing? It's like, what has been some of the success stories or impact that you can remember?
For me, let me talk about the filmmakers, because this is when we really felt like we had actually done something. And that was like after COVID, we really struggled to get our head around like how we were going to do it, whether we should even do it. And then just the sheer number of filmmakers who are like, are you going to do the thing or what? Because my film is coming out and you haven't set the dates of submission. And there's a little bit of an entitlement or like, just do it already. Filmmakers saying to us, what do we need to do to help you so that you can do it? And that buy-in from that creative community being like, this is a necessary and essential platform and it's doing something. And then to filmmakers like actively seeking our platform to be where they premiere their films, or referring to us as the place that really gave their film a second life. And to see that happening has been really gratifying and very satisfying, and just to feel like, okay, this is us making a significant contribution in the industry. It's also when being able to really surprise an audience who just were like, oh, I've got to go to this thing. Somebody has given me a ticket. And they come out and they're like, this was incredible, And it's a film that's Kenyan filmmakers or African filmmakers, they would have never occurred to them. And then those people are actively asking you all the time, when is the next edition happening? And also that strong feedback you get from audiences about how they want you to do your thing. Next time, what you do, because Kenyans are great at this, is like how invested they're getting in how they want your thing to be running from now onwards. This thing that you've done here, we don't want it. What we want, like the films were wonderful, but can you have more happy ones? These ones were very serious. I was like, you guys are making serious films. It's a grave continent at the moment, And so that's been very satisfying.
Impact, success stories.
For me, I agree completely. It's about how does the audience feel coming out of the space? Do they feel like this space belongs to them? It's also just kind of seeing that we do have that chill zone and seeing people just like in between the program, just chilling. Please come and join us. I'll make sure I attend everyone's festivals. But for real, it's just to see people just relax and having a good time in between programs. People in the food court just chilling, chapping stories, eating. So it feels like it's really a festival for them. It belongs to them. And I think it does help making our festival free. I think that's been a big aspect of what people come to the space to experience. But we do have some ticketed stages, and even those people turn up for and are happy as they're coming out. I'm hoping they feel like that 300 bob, that 500 bob that they spend is well spent. And often it's like when you see them lingering in like a space, they don't want to go. that's such a big endorsement. And again, even as we get those, by the way, next time, could you? I love that too, because it's like they want to come and have a better experience and they want to bring their friends. So for me, it's also seeing faces that you've seen before come every year. It's such a wonderful endorsement that this is something that is worth their time, because Jogoo Road traffic is madness. Quando on Saturday, it's crazy, but people come and they give us their entire day. But for me, another metric is for the participants. Oftentimes we have about altogether maybe like 34 authors, both international and local. But no, maybe we go up until like 70 if I count even like moderators. And when they come back and say, oh man, thank you so much for that opportunity to talk about this topic, or to present it in this way, or to present it to an African audience, if you're bringing an audience from like maybe Southern America, because we also really want South to South engagement. And they're like, oh my God, I love that people are resonating with this idea. Because we also have like a survey thing afterwards, and guys are like, oh, I didn't know you guys do this thing. We're like, we've been trying to do it for 3 years, or we've been doing it for 3 years. Thank you for coming this year, for discovering it somehow, either word of mouth or marketing. So new audiences are also super exciting for us. But me personally, my metric of success is just any single person giving us their time, coming in with curiosity, coming in with knowledge. I don't matter. For me, it's like you are there. And even like you guys are here in the audience, for me, this is a metric of success. We're not room, but those who are here, who've heard, who maybe have learned something or will share something, for me, that's success. Because attention is like a very, very big currency. I don't take it for granted that people are giving us their ears. And as a curator, I'm like, what am I pointing people to? What is an idea or a space or a thought that maybe we don't give enough time to? Or we feel like we're isolated alone in this thought, like, me, I think this thing is crazy, or I think this thing is good. And then you find somebody else who agrees and you're like, yay, community is so important. So I love being in a position to create that for people and then to see the success of seeing people in this space. Yeah.
So for us, I think I would break down into, again, maybe like 3 things, right? Number 1 being audience experience, the artist experience, and then the third one being my personal experience. So for example, I like what you said about attention. I don't think any of us takes, for granted. Being able to create a community of music lovers who come there for the music. And you can see it in how they respond to different artists, new acts, legacy acts, etc. After the event, you'll do some social listening and, trying to understand what happened in the event, talking about the new acts they found there and how they are excited to have discovered maybe somebody new, or maybe to have listened to their favorite acts in a different way. Because, you can listen to someone today and then tomorrow they just speak to you differently. So, our audience having that experience from the music, number 1, and it being positive is usually a huge measure of success for us. The other one is usually the experience, like how did people feel? Did they eat? Was the food expensive? Was it good? Did the bars run out of water? Small things like that. Did they get value for the resources, for their time and the money that they contributed to the building of the platform? So from the audience side, it's usually how did they feel, number 1, just to be in the place from the time they entered. And also how did they feel about experiencing the acts that they found there? And when those results come in and when we do like our dipstick and it comes out like, it's positive, it's usually a huge measure of success for us. The other one is from the performance side, from the artist side, and from the crews as well, the teams that set it up. As a musician, having played in many different stages, big and small, we have stories. So it could be from the hospitality side, or it could be from the programming side, or it could be from the technical side. So if we do again our dipstick from the artist and it comes out as positive, the artist felt well taken care of, both off stage and on stage. That also gives us another star. The last one is mine. So for me, I'm very proud of, I think, what we've done so far. I feel like we contributed to a scene and elevated it, especially in regards to that line of music I'm talking about, which is folk and fusion. I feel like we really elevated that scene, recruited into the category, recruited a lot of people into that category. I see a lot of people adding vernacular into their music. When we were starting out, tulikuwa naambiwa hiyo ni ushamba. It was still cool, but it was a kind of niche-ish. But now I feel like it's very
mainstream.
It's kind of mainstream.
It was always cool, but now it's mainstream.
But now it's mainstream. So I'm really very, very, very proud of that. I feel like we contributed in a great way and elevated. And also, it might be vain, I really do like randomly see a tweet of a popular artist and then somebody just says, we've been having it. I first saw him at Folk Fusion in 2022. So that does, add to feel...
Like before they were major.
Yeah. So I think that's what I was saying about DJs.
But you saw that they were major then when other platforms might not have seen.
Sikuwa nataka kusema hivyo. I didn't want to say that. I just said, you see, as a consumer, so we're not I told you. So
but this is why you guys are curators, because you kind of have a vision that we don't see as the people who come to your festivals,
We are consumers of music, like consumers. We will go to a small show, we'll go to the big shows, we will be at every concert, no matter what is being played, we'll be everywhere. So I feel like we really were able to sort of like really know a lot of dope musicians even before they were a little bit more popular. And that's why we were able to put them there. So nikierere tulikuwa nayo mingi, which I think came out nicely, which paid off.
Fantastic. I would love to open the floor for you guys to speak to us.
My name is Tingwa Kel. So my question is, in the onset, when you have your idea and you've noticed a gap in the market and you want to communicate whatever ideas in your mind to the audience, yes, you have this brilliant idea, but then my assumption is the audience also has to know what you're planning. Like, let's say it's your first event, there's no one who knows you. How then do you invite people to your space? How then do you talk about whatever ideas in your mind?
I feel like that's a question I ask myself every edition. Every edition comes with its own like concerns and butterflies. Even if you have done them, there's always concerns going, like things move around. Venues change regulations. County governments, they change regulations all the time. Licensing changes. People's shelf pocket changes. So there's always be that point where you wonder, do I really have to do this? Is this a nice to have or a must have, sort of? But no, in regards to starting, I don't want to be descriptive, but I would say I think there's an aspect of convincing yourself first. Like convincing yourself like, this is something I really want to do and I'm really passionate about this and I really want to do it. And by convincing yourself first, I mean, you will also agree with yourself. Like, I am doing this because it's something I am passionate about and it's something I feel like has value to myself and to like a small community I have. And also convincing yourself and agreeing that yes, if I do this and these 5 people come, that is enough and that is okay and I have won, because that's the point, that's the starting point. And I'm a big believer of taking things one step at a time and allowing things to grow first organically, and if you can add other mechanics, even better.
Say birds of a feather flock together. So if you have friends who will come and will enjoy this thing, have a way of communicating with them. Where do you guys communicate? Is it on an Instagram group? Is it on a WhatsApp channel? Is it on email? I don't know, TikTok, unajua. And then find a way to also be letting them know what's going to happen. But it's also important to identify who is my audience. Where do they chill out discussing music reviews? Is it on Twitter? Is it, I don't know, wherever else? Yeah, that's my small piece of advice.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to recruit your family and friends. Hawa ni watu wako, that's your tribe. If you're on good terms in your way, but really just share with them and tell them, please share in your networks. And sometimes it really helps because maybe they know someone from work who would like such a thing. And then also there are a lot of event sites that are looking for content. So when you post them, tag Nairobi Now, tag WhatsApp Nairobi, all those places, send your stuff to them and they will post it. And it'll actually help you open up multiple networks. And you said it as a joke, but also really just put your ego aside and think about, why am I doing this? If it's doing it to satisfy yourself, then uta nuna, when those 3 people come. But if you're doing it for a bigger cause, then those 3 people will mean so much. It'll mean that the idea that you have resonates with someone.
I just want to focus on a little bit of the thing about starting a brand new event. And I think that there are specific interesting challenges about that you have to just accept. You have to accept that you're like Noah, right? Like you're like Noah who's been told to build an ark. Everybody is going to think you're insane. When we were like, we want to make a film festival. Like, why? But you also accept that maybe there likely will be 3 people. There's a film that I watched with 3 people in the cinema. One of them was Mbisi and the other one was my mother. And we had a wonderful time. We talk about that film often, you know? And you also take those moments to consider what feedback is this moment giving me about the way I communicated about this thing, you know? And it doesn't have to be so harsh. It kind of takes the edge off if you kind of really concentrate on being like, what has this given me the opportunity to discover and to learn about what needs to happen different?
There's another way I've seen people sort of soft entering the event space, which is, let's say if your event is like topical based, thematic, for example, I've seen a lot of people starting from commentary or podcasting and then going into the actual like physical event. So I feel like maybe you shouldn't be afraid to start talking about it. And then that way you grow like a small community online, which you can then convert into a physical space.
As we move into the digital age, that really thinking about like, who does that include in people who feel like they belong at your event, and who does that exclude? Who does it leave out? And who do you want to know about your event, or who have you decided doesn't need to know about your event? And for instance, when I was coming, because I have the benefit of having produced in several different decades now, which is shocking, you know, you go from like the street banners were hella effective back in the day because you had to put a street banner. Now, when I talk to my communications team, they're like, oh, we're not going to put a banner in the street. Who's going to go to city council? And I'm like, okay, I stand advised by the next generation. But like, I feel it. I feel like there's a sort of, you're not just telling the person, come, you're also telling the people, this thing exists, you know? You're moving the public consciousness forwards by saying, we're the kind of city that has these kinds of things, whether the person goes to that event or not. Knowing that folk fusion happens, it fills out my cultural landscape in a way. So it's kind of important for us to think about that often, yeah.
Such an interesting conversation around curating festivals and being a curator, period. I hope you have learned something from today's episode and continue to learn from season 5 of VIP Access. So many amazing conversations about how to be the best at what you do in the creative industry. Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers this week on the podcast, Sheba, Ayrosh, and Wanjeri, for bringing your insights. But I want to also mention that all the festivals that they are involved in are actually back this year. All the dates are out. Please mark them on your calendar and just go out there and support them, experience what we're discussing on this podcast. Let's not just talk about enjoying festivals or curating them, but let's also go out there and just be there, experience them, enjoy them, and of course, support all the creatives who are working hard behind the scenes. The NBO Film Festival is back this year and will be set up between the 15th and 25th of October. At the moment, you can actually submit your stories and films to the festival. If you're a storyteller, if you're a filmmaker from around Africa, please check out the NBO Film Festival website for the details. The Folk Fusion Festival is also back and will be going down on the 6th of June, 2026. Please go to Folk Fusion Instagram or pages and get your tickets, and stay tuned for more details on who will be performing on that edition of Folk Fusion. Last but not least, the NBO Litfest is upcoming from the 8th to 10th of May. This is going to be amazing. As always, the festival presents writers, thinkers, innovators from all over the world, authors, of course. So stay tuned for that. Go over to NBO Litfest to get the details. That's a wrap for part 1 of our conversation on curating festivals. We're going to have a part 2 of this conversation dropping next week, where we're going to continue exploring the intention behind lineups and the careful balance required to create something meaningful, inclusive, and engaging. If you are interested in not just attending festivals, but truly understanding how they're designed to work for different layers of people, you don't want to miss the second part of this conversation. So stay with us. Leave us your feedback. I'm hoping to see you at the Goethe Institute this Friday for a conversation around spotlighting the film industry and the balance between creative and commerce. Thank you so much for joining us. See you again next week. VIP Access Season 5 is proudly supported by the Goethe Institute Nairobi.